Even after spending so many years in a marriage, there comes a point when one of the two spouses has that moment of weakness and doubts their relationship. Was this how it was meant to be? Is this really where I should be? These were just some of the questions this wife asked herself before tricking her husband to prove his loyalty. However, things don't always go as planned, and this wife was about to find out the hard way, leaving her wondering, how did I get myself into this pickle? Marriage is a special bond for people, and when they decide to get into this type of commitment, it's usually with someone they share a special bond with, someone who gets them, a person who can make them happy for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, not all relationships are based on such healthy terms, and there can be a few trust issues down the line. This one wife suffered from a similar case of mistrust when it came to her husband. So, just to be sure how loyal her husband actually was, she came up with a bright idea of hiding under the bed and hearing the reaction of her husband to a weird prank she thought of. Let us assure you, she could have thought of countless other ways to find out about his true feelings. The couple had spent many years of happy marriage together, but now the wife felt that her husband was slowly drifting away from her. Feeling strongly about the notion that he did not love her anymore, the wife was determined to confirm those feelings. So, obviously, she had to devise an elaborate plan to actually get to know how the husband felt, rather than just talking about her feelings with him. But as it would later turn out, the wife would be shocked to her very core to find out how her husband actually felt about her. It seemed like her husband kept tearing away from her day after day, indulging himself in solitude and away from her. There had to be something he was hiding from his wife, maybe a secret affair, or an addiction that would guarantee a crack in the marriage. Whatever it was, his wife was not going to let this go. As crazy as this idea to formulate a scheme sounds, the wife did have some strength in argument, and this argument might even make you doubt your own spouse. Because of all the mistrust that had developed inside of the woman, it compelled her to write this one note to her husband. Inside the note were all the details of their relationship and all the events and things that made their marriage go wrong, or at least planted the seeds of disaster. Teary-eyed and emotional as ever, the woman questioned her marriage of many years and her husband, who might have turned fickle. In her heart of hearts, she prayed and hoped he hadn't, but she had to be sure. It was imperative to know whether he felt the same about her as she did about him, or was he just barely pulling through this relationship, not wanting to be in it anymore? Was it all just an act? Was he wasting both of their times? The letter that consisted of all the wrongdoings in their marriage and the pitfalls that had damaged everything ended on a similar dark note. The wife wanted a divorce from her husband. All this was done in order to find out if her husband truly loved her or not. The letter was to be left by the woman for her husband in their room. The husband would eventually come in to find the letter, while his wife would judge his honest reaction to the gruesome piece of literature in his hands. Regrettably, the wife hadn't planned for the worst-case scenario if things went wrong, and she was soon to find out that she should have done that. Remember her plan to see his honest reaction? Well, that wouldn't be possible if she just stood in front of her husband while he read the letter. So her plan consisted of her hiding under the bed when her husband came in to read the letter. This would be a sure-shot way of finding out his true feelings regarding her and their marriage. It seemed like a complicated trick on her end to pull off, but she had to do something to see a genuine reaction, and not a situation where her husband had to hold himself back with his emotions, whatever they were. But was that really going to happen? Or would this man see through all the trickery and actually call her out on her plan? It played out perfectly in the wife's mind. It was simple, concise, and well thought out. She would leave the letter on the bed, and when the husband would come in to read it, she would by then be hiding under it. When the husband would reveal his emotions and would start to cry, she would come out of the bed and comfort him, telling him about her prank and why she did what she did. This would all end in mutual expressions of love and care, and the couple would laugh it off in the end. Surprisingly for the woman, though, things didn't go this way at all. In fact, what happened when the husband actually read the letter shocked the wife, and to be honest, it'll shock you too. The note that was written by the wife was cruel in nature, and that is an understatement. The letter pointed out the fact that love between the two had died and their marriage was crumbling to pieces, pieces that could not be put together. Of course, this was the wife's point of view. Everything was said in an extremely straightforward way, and the wife's intentions seemed to be blunt. This was all done to get a genuine reaction out of her husband, and it seemed logical to be this way for the wife. The note was left on the bed, and under the bed was where the wife's next destination was. Everything was going according to plan, but it was soon to be discovered that this prank was her worst decision ever. It took some time for her husband to get home, and the wife waited this entire time under the bed. While she was there, the wife actually got to go over her plan one final time and to reflect on everything she was doing in order to find out how her husband felt about her and their marriage. Was this really the way to go about finding out the truth? Was she doing the right thing? What if his reaction isn't similar to the one she was expecting? It wasn't going to be long before she found out the answers to all her questions, and they weren't necessarily going to be according to what she wanted from her husband. Fear crept all over her as she waited under the bed silently, waiting for the verdict to her relationship. It was then that she heard her husband enter the house. Her heart thumped more vigorously with every step of the stairs he climbed. This was it. It all came down to this one final moment. The husband knew that his wife would be home at this hour, but he did not expect the welcome he was about to get. There lay the note which would define his future, which was to be with or without his wife. What was he going to do? He finally stepped into their bedroom. She could see him pacing around the room with those black boots thumping on the carpet. He had seen the letter as soon as he walked in, and she had frozen with fear since the moment he had picked it up. A torrent of emotion ran through her, thinking of every possible reaction she was soon to hear. It was a do-or-die situation for her marriage, and the weight was eating her up. What happened next shook the woman to her very core. The husband came to a halt, and she knew he had finished reading the letter. Then the most unexpected thing happened. The husband burst out in laughter. The woman under the bed couldn't believe what she was hearing, and to top it all off, this wasn't the end of it. She heard her husband taking out his cell phone, and he actually made a call to his friend. "My marriage is finally over. I'll see you in a minute." He rushed out of the room, leaving his wife dazed, confused, and horrified. She couldn't have imagined in her wildest dream that her husband would handle the situation the way he did. It was time for her to get out from under the bed and analyze the situation. The woman lay there as if she was shot down with a stun gun. Paralyzed with confusion, her mind started boggling inside her head. It wasn't just that her husband was happy to end their marriage, but the fact that he had already told someone of his unhappiness with his marriage made everything much worse. Who could it be on the other side of the phone? Perhaps a mistress? Or a friend who was guiding him away from her? The situation intensified, and the wife grew more and more impatient. But perhaps the real answer to this question might make all of us chuckle in the end. Oh, how the tables had turned. Something that was supposed to pass on like a light-hearted but vital prank to judge the marriage had gone awfully wrong, leaving the woman teary-eyed. Her hope of making her husband realize the gravity of the situation had not gone as planned. There were no tears or even a slight feeling of remorse or sadness on the husband's part. Instead, the entire burden had shifted to the wife. There wasn't much she could do now, as all of this was set in motion by her, and now she had to face the music, whether it was to her liking or not. This situation demanded more from the woman than the one she was in before the entire conundrum. Before, it was just a test she devised for her spouse, but the outcome was one she wasn't sure she could handle in such short notice. It was bad enough that her husband didn't care about their relationship and was more than happy to get out of it scot-free, but there were serious doubts about his faithfulness and whether he had already been cheating on her for an unknown amount of time. This notion of him cheating on his wife shattered her heart into pieces that could never be glued back together. Was this really how it was going to be? Was this how her marriage supposed to end? Flabbergasted because of the events that unfolded before her eyes, the woman was not sure at all about what to do next. Thoughts about rebuilding her life ran through her mind, that too alone, with no one by her side. She came out from under the bed with tears running down her face, and that is when she spotted something out of the corner of her eye. another note right beside her laying on the bed. Her husband must have left it there with a short time he was in the room before running off to tell his friend about his newly found freedom. The wife rushed to open the note, and this is where things get really interesting. Through the blurred vision caused by the tears in her eyes, she struggled to read the note her cold-hearted husband had left her. Despite the fact that she was heartbroken and gut-wrenched, she still managed to open the letter and read the demise of her marriage written on a piece of paper. The first words she read were, "Dear wife," just at the top of the page. This is when she broke down in tears and couldn't force herself into reading the rest of the letter, but she knew it had to be done. This was the only time she could sanely read her husband's cold response. The note left by the husband was concise and didn't contain many words, and the woman felt like she already knew what she was going to read. A short reply to hers agreeing with the fact that their marriage had been going downhill for quite some time, and it was her that took too long to reach that point. The husband was dragging through the entire thing. After all, his reaction said everything, and whatever he had to say to her must have been to the point, as it took only a few sentences on the page. The question was, what exactly did he write? Finally, mustering up the courage to go through the entire letter, she carefully read each and every word, and as she reached that one decisive line, which assured her of the situation, that was the moment she was eager to find herself in. The letter read, "Dear wife, next time you try to trick me into proving my love, make sure your feet aren't sticking out from underneath the bed." Could this have backfired more horribly? The woman had planned this entire scheme for weeks, and just at the crucial moment of executing it all, she forgot one minor thing: hiding completely and not getting caught. Weeks of careful planning had gone so awfully wrong, but there was a bright side. Her husband was a good sport about the prank in the spirit of playing along, and had it not been that way, it would have turned out very disturbingly for the woman. But all this lighthearted humor on the husband's part is vital for a relationship. Although it's safe to say that the woman would have preferred avoiding the embarrassment she was now left with. After wiping her tears away and getting her strength back, the woman put the pieces of the puzzle together, and to her pleasure, she found out that she hadn't ruined her marriage, nor had she driven her husband away from her. The call her husband made was fake, and there was no one on the other side of the line, and his laughter wasn't genuine at all. Her husband wanted to teach her a valuable lesson about not playing with people's emotions. But at the end of the day, all of us want to know, did she really learn her lesson, and did her husband forgive her for this childish prank she tried to pull off? It's not just the woman who is supposed to learn a lesson here. In fact, all of us can take home something useful from this elaborate story. The lesson is, it doesn't have to be a well-thought-out scheme to find out if your spouse or your partner is still into your relationship. The key to a stable relationship is trusting each other and being honest and open with one another. If you don't want to take our word, ask the woman yourself, as she learned that petty pranks like this don't work. And luckily, it didn't end her relationship with her husband as well. But did the couple stay together after this incident? The wife here didn't exactly get the heart-wrenching relationship she wanted from her husband after pulling off this weird prank. But thanks to the husband and his level of understanding, their relationship was strengthened, and it lasted a long and healthy life.